Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Yarn Thing podcast with Marley Bird. I'm your host, Marley Bird. You can catch the Yarn Thing podcast live every Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock Mountain Time. That's 12 o'clock on the East Coast, 9 o'clock on the West Coast, and 11 o'clock in the Midwest. If you are anywhere else in the world and would like to join us for the podcast, please Google what time 10 o'clock Mountain Time is for you, or go ahead and hit subscribe right here on YouTube, and make sure you click that little bell, and you'll be notified whenever I do go live. We have a live show. It is downloadable after the podcast airs as well. So if you aren't able to join us live, that's okay. There's always a chance for you to still get all of the information and enjoy the fun that we have over here. We are lucky enough to have some wonderful sponsors of the Yarn Thing podcast. So we're going to say thank you to them right now. And that would include Creative Bug, Craftsy.com, Aaron Lane Bags, Buffalo Wool Company, Stitches.events, and last but not least, Red Heart Yarns, where I'm the proud national spokesperson. You can learn more about the sponsors by visiting marleybird.com, clicking on the podcast menu, and it drops down. You'll be able to click on sponsors. There's a direct link to each one of them right there. If you don't mind, go by, tell them thank you for sponsoring your favorite podcast. So today, obviously, it is not 10 o'clock Mountain Time. We are a little bit later in the day. I was just telling our guest today that my kids are now on summer break, and it is totally wreaking havoc on my schedule. And so I can't seem to get anywhere on time at all. So much so I think I'm going to have to alter my work schedule and start at noon. So stay tuned for that, because it might be that I have to do the podcast at noon over the summer. I don't know yet. We'll have to see how I can manage all this. But all that is to say, I'm glad you guys are here, and I'm really grateful that today's guests were flexible enough to be able to work with me and change the podcast time just a little bit. And who are today's guests? Well, I am super excited today to talk to Mitchery and Chris. They are the owners of Brittany Knitting Needles and Crochet Hooks. Big fan of their utensils. I've never had a chance to meet them or talk with them before, so this is a true treat for me. And I hope that they're able to encourage you guys to go pick up some of their spectacular needles and crochet hooks. If you had a chance to watch the crochet hook review that I did with Caitlin and Brittany, it was like last week or the week before, I can't remember. It was excellent. We went over as many crochet hooks as we had around, and all of us agreed that the Brittany crochet hooks were just beautiful and really wonderful, and we really enjoyed them. So if you get a chance, go check out that review. It was right here on YouTube. So let's go ahead and say hello to the guest today. Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hi, Marley.
Thanks for having us.
I am so thrilled you are here. Caitlin is doing such a good job doing reviews for me as far as different products and books and stuff. And when she got the Brittany hooks, she was beside herself. And the needles, like, she was like, "These are so great." And I'm like, "I know they are." And so we have been excited to try and get you guys on for a while. So I'm thrilled you're here.
Super excited to be here. And my name is very complicated, but it's hard to see. It's Mickery.
Mickery.
Like
Did I say Mitchery?
Yeah, because that's how it's spelled.
Oh.
That's how you would think you would say it.
All right. See, and it's funny because in my head I was telling myself hickory, 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 and I just, I'm going to blame it on not enough coffee yet today. Mickery.
I'm just happy.
It goes.
Call me anything you want. I'm just happy to be here.
There you go. So tell me a little bit about you guys. Why don't you give me the history of how I'm hoping that one of you is a knitter or a crocheter, and that's kind of how you got into this industry, or is it woodworking? Like, where did this all start for you?
Well, actually, my dad started the company. It was 40 years ago, or a little more than that now. And at the time, he was the first wood needle to come out on the market. So there wasn't wood knitting needles or crochet hooks at the time. To a little bit of his background, he worked in kind of corporate manufacturing, like R&D. He was an engineer. And he really got disenchanted with corporate life, as I think a lot of, us do, get into our own thing and try to find our own path. And so he was really tired of developing these really cool products for this big corporation, and they would just shelve products and things and not really have the customer in mind. And so he really wanted to do something independent. My mom was a knitter, crocheter, weaver, and he actually started out making looms, and he made these really nice tapestry looms. And they're still out there in the world, several hundreds of them. But he found you can only sell like one loom to a weaver, and weavers still were pretty few and far between. So he wanted something smaller that there's a lot of variety in, like knitting needles. There's a we have nearly 100 sizes of 100 products now, with certainly more on the horizon that we're always trying to shoehorn in somewhere into our production. We're in our shop right now, as you can see. So he actually went to, I remember this, we were at a craft fair. I was a little kid when this had 4 years old or something. I mean, negative 20 years. But he was looking at these wood turned pens, and they were really beautiful. You've probably seen these fountain pens out there in the world. And he asked the guy, have you ever thought about making a knitting needle? And the guy said, oh no, that's impossible. You can't turn something that's that long and skinny and have it not break on the lathe. And my dad thought, aha, can't do it, huh? Perfect. I'll if I can figure out how to do this. And he thought he could. And especially do it in like kind of a really production way where we're going to be able to produce a lot of them with good quality. And so he went down that road and succeeded. And so about 20 years later, I came into the scene. I was working as a chef at the time, and he was really buried in this business with work. I mean, the demand for, at the time, there wasn't as many wood needles out on the market as there are now. There's a lot of competition out there. So he was very busy and, looking for help. And I was working my late night kitchen job, which is not without its stresses, and home life that I was looking forward to having someday, and finding somebody I could fall in love with and start a family. Was the prospect of that wasn't looking that great with cooking, chefing. So, I gave it a try. I'd always been a fan of woodworking. When I was a kid, my favorite PBS shows in the morning, Sunday mornings, were Woodwright's Shop and This Old House, and all the cooking shows. Yan Can Cook and Julia Child were like raised me on Sunday. Yeah, if Yan can cook, so can you.
Yes! Love Yan Can Cook. That was my favorite. All right, keep going.
Yeah, any of those people you could laugh at were really great. And Roy Underhill of the Woodwright's Shop was awesome. He did these old-timey woodworking things, and I always wanted to have my own shop that I could take and walk to over a stream, hopefully, or something, because he did this great little montage at the beginning. Anyway, now here I am, and we have our shop really right near our house. It's 300 feet up the trail from us. Sometimes there's a little bit of water I have to jump across if there's a large puddle. So I really do my channeling of Roy Underhill in the morning when I get to come down. So, looking back, it's an interesting path that brought me here. I've always been very hands-on building things. I built my own car when I was a kid. I bought a truck that was in pieces when I was 12 years old. And by the time I was a junior in high school, I had it on the road. So I had a car before that, but that was like my first car. And I literally put everything together, every nut and bolt by myself, with my dad's help. And so we've always worked together pretty well. Being an engineer, he sort of has that engineer mind that makes that difficult sometimes, but really a brilliant guy. Brilliant guy. And he came up with this way of making the knitting needles that is sort of, we won't get very specific about how our machines do things because it's sort of a trade secret. And we don't think that there's anybody else out there making needles the way we do exactly. Most of the needles on the market are a little bit different than ours, and we'll explain that later perhaps. But in any case, when I came into the business, he had this first machine that he built to kind of prove that he could make the needles, and it's sitting right over here now. And I actually we still use that, and we're making our crochet hooks that have that fancy end on them, and also our new walnut needles that are the dark wood needles that you tried that we sent over. So we've brought those back, and we could talk about why they're left and why they're back and things like that later. Yeah. But so when I came on, he had that one machine, and then another one that kind of had a better feeding system and would hold more sticks that would then get turned into needles. And that's for the kind of initial shaping of the needles and sanding and stuff like that all happens within these automated machines. And that's how Mickery and I are really able to keep this manufacturing operation in America. We're not outsourcing anything. It really is just the two of us who do all the production here. Wow. We have a couple. Yeah, we think so too.
Yeah.
but we have a couple of independent contractors who help us out. We have a great friend who does our packaging, and Mickery's stepmom does some of the really fine polishing. She's a really detail-oriented person. So like on the crochet hooks, she actually polishes out the throat, the whole inside part of that hook. All those edges get polished off by hand by her to make sure, because if there's a little tiny snag, it can be a hair of a splinter sticking off, and it will catch and it will drive crocheters crazy.
Yes.
Yeah. So we know, and we both do knit and crochet. I used to actually crochet my own hacky sacks when I was in high school.
Nice.
For my friends too. So I kind of had developed my own pattern and would make my friends bags with different things inside of them in case they wanted different reactivity to their hacky. But that was our thing in high school to pass the time between classes. And yeah, I mean, we do knit. I'll speak for myself. I mean, I know how to knit, and I can pick up some needles, and I'm a funny knitter. I sort of have this aisle style with and I switch hands. I'm kind of ambidextrous, so I do this weird always purl, knit to one side and then knit back again with the other hand.
Yeah.
But it just turns out better for me. And as you know, whatever works for you is the way that you knit or crochet. I watched your crochet review. Was a really good show, and it is interesting to hear. It's great to hear the different you guys sitting together and talking about how different each thing can be for each person, because the pencil hold, certainly our hooks are better for that.
Yes, they are.
I may be getting off track.
No, but you're absolutely correct. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, that's pretty much. And then so I came on to the business I'll get back to the history. Came back to the business came to the business about 20 years ago, which means I was 5 years old at the time. And Mickery, a few years after that, came on. She was teaching math at the time in high school, and
God bless you.
Yeah, well, that sort of was the payoff here, and the together time seemed really well worth it, and we're really lucky that we get along so well and can work together, that we don't usually like to kill each other.
You know what? That's a big deal. I'm going to have you pause there for a second, because one of the benefits that I've had having so many wonderful guests on the show is talking to so many husband-wife teams that are able to work together. And then there are some that are like, there's no way in hell I would work with my husband or my wife, right? I think of Carl and Eileen from Bijou Basin Ranch, Steve and Kathy Elkins from Webb's. I mean, there's so many. And then, there's even Indian Lake Artisans. That's a husband and wife team. They're knitting needles and stuff. I mean, so it's so fascinating and encouraging for me to see couples like yourself who are able to work together. My husband is constantly asking if he can come home and work from home, and I'm like, maybe next year. We still need your health insurance,
I'm working on your job description.
Yeah. So I think that is fantastic. You guys are able to work together like that.
We do too. It's really nice. And for, we have a 8-year-old son, and it's great. In the summertime, things, as get crazy with trying to figure out what you're going to do, when you used to have this built-in thing every day that they would go and do and be learning. And now I feel a responsibility to try to have something engaging for him. And that gets tough. And so having both of us here and having the flexibility and our shop is here at home, gives us the flexibility to, that one of us can be keeping things running here at the shop while the other one's making dinner. I think it keeps us healthy too, because we're always eating at home. We don't have this kind of commuter lifestyle where you're picking up something here and there. When the shop used to be at my dad's house. And so we were commuting down there for quite a while. And by the way, we took the business over 5 years ago so. And so we've been, in charge of all the other stuff too. We've been doing production. We've been making all the knitting needles for almost the whole time. But now we're making decisions on what our marketing does and what our pricing is, and things, more nuanced things that we hope to help grow this business into, I guess, and again, more well-known brand, because we sort of slipped. Brittany used to be, as I said, they were the only wood needle on the market. And so, with competition coming in, and my dad was always a fan of letting the needle speak for itself, and so we always really were pushing forward on improving, making them more slippery is one of the things that we always know that knitters and crocheters too, you need that that slickness. You want those stitches to glide, and so we've always been developing our finish and doing very specialty things within our operation to make them smoother. We think that we're as close to a metal needle as you can get. You'll never be able to see yourself in the polish of a wooden needle, so that's pretty much makes them not as slick as a metal needle. But we do try to get as close as we can, and in our testing we think that we really do come very close to that. So
they're very nice and very smooth. I like them a lot. Brittany needles were actually some of my first quote unquote expensive needles I bought. Like we're at the actual yarn store, because I thought they were so beautiful, and I loved the way they felt in my hands when I was working with them. And it was the double points actually is what I bought. And they just felt really nice. I liked them a lot because I love double pointed needles. So it was really good. But I think you do a great job. Mickery, since you are the one that came into the business, were you a knitter or crocheter beforehand, or were you like, what, you work with knitting needles? Like what was your first reaction? Really? Is this some sort of weird pickup line? What's this?
I did learn to knit when I was an exchange student. Actually, I went to Sweden, and there was another exchange student and I talking with our housemates, and he could not believe that we didn't know how to knit. Because in Sweden, it was just everybody knew. But he's like, you didn't learn how to knit when you were a kid? Like, that's crazy. Go. So we went like that day to the yarn shop, and we got some aluminum needles and some yarn, and we sat down and he taught us how to knit. So I did know how to knit. And I do like knitting. And when I met Chris, actually, he had made some hair sticks.
Oh.
So he cut off some knitting needles and gave me some hair sticks. I'm like, who is this guy with the hair sticks?
It worked.
I love it.
And then we were dating for a while, and we went to a Stitches, West Coast Stitches, and I swear he was like a movie star. Like every booth we went to, like, oh, you make Brittany needles? I'm like, yeah, my guy's something.
That's awesome.
And I was actually already just on the path to get my teaching credential. I had just started, got accepted to the program. And so I started teaching math that year, and I taught math for a couple of years. And I really I love working with kids. I love math. Loved all that. There's some politics involved and that aren't as fun to deal with sometimes. And they lay off beginning teachers at the end of every year. I don't know if you knew that. And so anyway, at the end of one of the school years, I started working with Chris because he and his dad were both swamped. And he was like, we really need somebody maybe for the summer. You can just come try it out. And I fell in love. I love it. It was and I did do woodworking when I was a kid with my dad also, and have a lot of the same history as Chris. Also built a car with my dad when I was 15. And so the machine part of it really came naturally. Like I like turning bolts. I'm comfortable with all of that. And the woodworking part. And I love the smell of sawdust and or the smell of the machines and the smell of the shop. It just feels like home. And so my first day I started working with him, I was like, this is it. I love this.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. I love it. I love it. So talk to me about the needles. So you guys offer a couple different ones. It's birch needles, right? Because that's what I recall it was Brittany, because I thought about it, it's like what is it, automatopoeia or whatever, like Brittany Birch. Like that's what comes to my head,
Alliteration.
Alliteration, that's the word. Yes, thank you.
I love alliteration. It's one of my favorite things. So yeah, my dad started with the walnut needles, with that fancier end. You want to grab a couple of things or just bring them?
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Yeah, and so he started with the walnut needles, and So and some, and so they're really nice. They're very beautiful. They looked great sticking out of people's baskets next to their chairs, but that's kind of what we were selling. A lot of them at the beginning were sort of only getting this kind of, if you wanted something to look really pretty, sticking out of a ball of yarn strategically, it was really amazing. But trying to convince people that they should be knitting with wood was another thing. And we really believe in it. As you know, they feel great in your hands. They're warm. There's a lot of you touched on it with the crochet review, that anybody with arthritis or any joint difficulties in your hands, it really helps to knit with something that's natural. That's going to be warm. Aluminum will just draw heat away from you like crazy. So if you have cold hands too, and you're just finding that that's annoying, I would switch to something, ours particularly, but anything natural, wood or bamboo is going to be better. I think wood is a superior product from bamboo, frankly, in the natural zone. It's got a finer grain structure that helps it to not kind of grow snags. The bamboo seems to grow
Bamboo's terrible with snags. That's what I always get with my bamboo ones. I get terrible snags. I didn't review it that way on the podcast thing, but yeah, my bamboo ones, they do. I mean, they're horrible. It's just, so I just choose not to use them.
It's just a way that, it's a much coarser kind of bundle of strands, if you think about it. And you can cut that bundle of strands like a bundle of hair, but you can cut it at an angle, and then eventually all those things start floating up, and so you get these little microscopic little ends, and there are a bunch of little fingers pulling on your yarn.
Yep.
And these things get polished up really well. They're very shiny, smooth. And so this was the first needle that he came up with. Now they have this great, beautiful turned end, which a lot of people found to be a problem, because if you're knitting, and especially if you had a 14-inch needle like this, you sit there and you knit and you poke your husband or wife over and over. Or if it's like your favorite, if it's your favorite armchair, you're sitting there and you're banging into the chair every time. And so people wanted something a little bit shorter up here, something not so, because it just gave the extra length that became annoying to some people, and also a lighter wood for depending on what yarn you're using, because sometimes it's easier to see your stitches if you're using a real dark yarn and you have these almost black brown needles. Stuff starts disappearing on these, and you're having trouble seeing the difference. Or then so then we came up with the birch needle, which has a little bit simpler design end on there. And that, so that shortened it up. It's also not quite as pokey at the end, so not quite as much of.
Would it be helpful to have my hand behind, like Caitlin did on your crochet hook?
I think they're showing up pretty well. I got them.
Cool. Yeah. So we came up with the birch line. That was kind of and also kind of an answer to making things a little bit more affordable. Birch in general is a little bit, it's more widely available wood, which makes it a little cheaper. It's a worldwide commodity kind of a wood. The walnut is particular to North America. So, it's a much smaller supply and a more expensive wood. Walnut is today one of the most expensive woods on the market. Of especially the American woods, where it's getting up there into the prices of the exotics and stuff, which we don't use exotic woods on principle. We can get into sustainability and ethos, but yeah. So our birch line, we do single points and double points, which you mentioned earlier, and we're trying to. So now. Our walnut supply got a little funny several years ago, and we discontinued the line because we just really are only interested in putting out quality products. If we think they're going to break, we don't want them. We'll just stop putting them out, because and we do guarantee all of our products. They're wood, they do break, but we guarantee them against almost everything, including like dog ate it, significant other sat on it. We've now just added wizarding incident to our breakage.
It's Leviosa,
because it comes up.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that happens, and we cover them against, you know, Ministry of Magic taking your needles or anything else. And that came about because customers contacted us and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so heartbroken. My kids got into my needles," and we said, you know, we will cover them, and we actually sent along a few defective ones that we had and said, "Okay, give these to the wizards," and
You know what?
that'll
It's
keep them
funny
busy.
because they do kind of look like they would be really great wizarding wands. Like,
We
absolutely.
get that a lot. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I wonder if you could make one that looks like it's the elder wand, be like, these are my elder needles, you know? There you go.
I do think, yeah.
I
So,
have supplied kids' birthday parties before, for
That's
sure. Like Harry
awesome.
Potter themed parties.
Yes. All right. Sorry, I got totally sidetracked. The nerd in me is coming out. I apologize.
happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we discontinued the walnut for a little while, although, you know, when we found that the wood supply came back and was looking good, went back into it, and especially to help us, you know, kind of differentiate this line of, you know, this, because the wood is a lot more expensive, and actually we're doing this, as I said earlier, on the oldest machine we have. It's a much slower process. We do this kind of in the old way that we've always done things, where we've constantly been improving our automation, and, you know, which in turn really improves the finish and the consistency of gauge in our needles too. Our process is such that it's much more like how things are machined in manufacturing of like ball bearings or machine shafts and things, where our needles are extremely accurate. So our metric size is actually the size that's there. You know, there's very little variance. Plus or minus 1/1000th of an inch is what what we spec ourselves to have over the whole distance of this shaft. So it doesn't vary much. Like, my hair is not super thick, and it's like 0.003 of an inch. So when we say we're splitting hairs, we're splitting them a couple times before we get to how accurate we like to be with our needles. So as far as between our needles, you can swatch on one and switch to another style. Like if you wanted to swatch on a single point, but you were actually going to do a double point, you could switch back and forth and not worry about having them be slightly different. It doesn't have to be the specific ones with our needles. I think some of the wood needles I've tested out there don't come up that close.
No, they don't. So here's a question for you. Some of the wooden needles that I've used, actually, they're more the bamboo ones. The bamboo naturally kind of bends in itself, but when I start to get to the smaller sizes, the zeros, the ones, twos, threes, there's a lot of give. So much so I've broken a lot of them. Not your needles, but I mean, so that's what my point is. How do your needles usually hold up at those smaller sizes?
Yeah, they do. We do pretty well. You know, our distributors all tell us that our breakage rates in general are much lower than any other wood needles. Yeah, much lower. Like, they make jokes about that they're annoyed when they have to replace one of our needles because they're all the ones that they have. Like the spare ones they have are always dusty, and they have to dust them before they give them out. They just don't turn them over very much.
Yeah.
So they sort of, you know, that's sort of a different thing. But also, so in the very smallest needles we have, like our sock needles, you know, our 5-inch double point, we go down to a 0 on those. And so the 0 through 2, you'll find like a little card like this in your package, read me. But it just tells you that we're actually including 6 needles instead of 5 in which we do 5 in our regular double point sets. So if you're a European style double point knitter and you knit with 4 and the extra one, or the one you're working with,
that's what I do.
We have all 5. Yeah, all 5. Well, it makes more of a circle.
It makes more sense.
Otherwise you're making a triangle, aren't you?
Yep, and you get ladders because there's more stress on the stitches. It just get up. Yeah, there you go.
Exactly.
Very
so
smart,
we
man.
include all 5. And then in those very smallest needles we include 6, just in case you're working and one of them snaps. So you can keep going. We're really interested in, as you know, keeping those projects rolling is the hardest part. You know, it's like the momentum you have. We really feel strongly that you need to be able to keep that going. So we also try to, if you break one of the little ones, and again, it's not a big deal. You can hopefully go back to your LYS, and if they have the same size on the shelf, they should just pluck one out and hand it to you. They'll get a new one from their distributor And then also the other thing is that doesn't incur any extra shipping, and not that we're afraid of the shipping cost as much as just the fossil fuel use. We're like so sustainably minded and keeping our carbon footprint down that we really like to try to have as little extra shipping things around as we can. So you go back to the place you bought it, if you hopefully bought it from your local yarn store, which we really believe in that model. Then they'll get you started right away, and you're back on track. If you're not near your store, you can go to our website and you fill out a little form online, and we'll send you a new needle. And we don't ask that anybody sends us like the broken one back. We don't want to just have an envelope going through the mail for no reason, so it can go into, I'm pointing over here because that's where our scrap needle that starts fires to keep us warm in the winter is. We don't need more of those.
Also, I was going to say, when we took over from his dad, I took over the double point machine. And so I make the zeros, ones, 1.5s. And I spend a lot of time looking at every single needle at every stage of the process. And so I look to make sure the grain is straight, and I look to make sure there's no knots in the wood, because any of those things will eventually be a weak point and could break, like if they're flexing or something. So I do that as through each step of production. And then at the end, right before they get packaged, I have a special light. Oh my God. and I have it, and I put them on a piece of white background, and I roll them across under this special light and make sure, and anything that is slightly defective at that point will kind of show up as like a shiny spot or something. And I have been looking at wood grain now closely for a long time, so I recognize where any of them will break, and I pull all those out at the end. So anyone that has made it into a package, I have gone through numerous times, so that hopefully you won't have that on your end, because I'd rather just have them not break, obviously.
And I think that points to something too, where we're keeping production here with us, and if we're the ones making the needles, then we're kind of doing that quality control the whole time in every step of the way. Where if we had outsourced this, if we'd outsourced it, we would only be able to look at it at the very end, and we would have also paid people to make them all the way through that process. Where now, if we missed it till the very end, at least we know that it was just us that didn't see that earlier or whatever, and that labor is only our own. So I think in any part of it where we've thought about like trying to get help, it always seems better to keep doing the main parts of the things ourselves to keep the quality up than becoming just a quality control couple. We could sit in our house and look at needles all day, but we'd rather actually be involved in making them. And we think we make a better product for it too.
That's perfect. This is something, I don't know if you planned on talking about this at all, but one of my favorite things that you guys make that I own several of, because I have them in all of my little knitting bags, are your cable needles. And it's because it comes in a pack of 3. And I love the fact that I have a choice of different sizes of cable needles. Yes, those are my favorite. And in all honesty, I don't use cable needles when I cable, but when I do, I use yours, because I don't like any of the other ones. Like it's a hindrance to me. But the fact that I can use yours at the different sizes, and like they're perfect. And so I love those so very much. Do you want to tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, well, this is a product that my dad,
I love them.
And they're just get skinnier in the middle, and then they're kind of bulb out at the ends, and it's pretty subtle, but it's enough, and you can easily get them into your stitch, and they stay.
Yes.
And these have a little bit more of a matte finish than our knitting needles, so they're still pretty shiny, and they're pretty, and they feel good, but they do want to stay a little more. So that with the little indentation that's on it makes them stay. And then the other thing that people like is then when you want it out of your way, boom, it comes right out.
That's right.
And there's no snagging. There's some that are similar to our design that have some notching kind of in the middle, and they say they snag exactly. They say they snag like crazy. And then there's the one that most people are familiar with, the plastic one that kind of have the U bend in them. And I think that they seem okay, but I mean that works. I think at least but you kind of do have to do this funny like little maneuver to get them out.
It's a pain in the butt.
Really like, but our cable needles, our best selling single product for sure.
Oh, really? I love them.
Yeah.
That doesn't shock me at all. They're fantastic.
Yeah. And I think it points to that the majority of knitters now are really knit on circulars. And, so this is a product that everybody tends to use. If you even are a casual cable knitter, you're still going to need a set of these. And, I think they also tend to disappear into the couch cushions pretty easily. So maybe that helps us sell a few more. We don't cover couch cushion loss. That's the one thing that we don't replace for. But
that's hilarious. Yeah, I love those. I think they're great. Now, what about the hair stick pin? Did you ever decide that you were going to do those?
Yeah. Well, the shawl pin is a product that we have, and that definitely came from Mickery being wooed by my bringing shawl pins into her place of business, and you need some of these, and then we were giving them away actually at a maker fair where there was a bunch of yarn stores, and we handed one to a yarn store owner, and she said, "Oh, a shawl pin," and we went, head slap. You mean we can sell these? Good, because we've just been giving them away to friends. So good idea.
So we worked with her and developed the exact right length to make it a shawl pin and brought it on as a product.
Yeah, and I almost think of it as like a utility pin. I mean, you can kind of do anything with it, from hair to your scarf.
Push the restart button on your internet, right?
Oh yeah,
totally.
If you work with your pad, it'll be a stylus. Our son has a Nintendo
2DS.
2DS, yeah, and he uses these as a stylus, and he'll go over to our firewood box and pick out a needle, and
that's awesome.
Get back on his thing, which I love too.
I love this. This is so great.
And
I'm gonna go ahead.
Sorry, they have the same finish as the cable needles, so they're slightly more matte. Even though they look shiny, it's not going to be as slick, and so we don't recommend that people knit with them. Even though I do they're accurate gauge, the points are accurate, all that, but they're going to be stickier, not as, but the same as a
so don't knit with 2 hair sticks, just buy some knitting needles.
Yeah,
I
will stay in your
yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I love that. I think it's so great. I'm going to look over here at the questions. There's so many people just oohing and eyeing over the beauty of the hooks. They love your story. Chris Lopez says, I'm floored about how reasonably priced they are. I'm ordering a couple of crochet hooks today to try. The guarantee is amazing. 5 years, exclamation point. So I think that's a great segue into the crochet hooks, because you started with knitting needles, and, I always call crochet and knitting, it's like the sharks and the jets. Like, they very rarely get along, but they're singing the same song, right? But they just aren't doing it. Yeah. So talk to me about your crochet hooks.
So the crochet hooks, I think we started making crochet hooks about the same time as the needles. So they've kind of come up alongside each other. Interestingly, knitting sort of has ebbed and flowed as far as our business goes, where crochet has always been kind of a smaller part, but has been really consistent. And now it seems to be consistently growing. And I think that there's, as evidenced by how many different hooks you had to review yesterday, or I watched your video yesterday, last week or 2 or whatever, that, there's a lot out there. And I think that, crocheters are becoming more discerning in their tools. Maybe is a good way to say it. But yeah, our hooks,
they're so pretty. They're so pretty. And they don't have the thumb grip.
No, with a wood hook, and especially when you start getting down into a smaller one, this is your favorite size, the
3.75.
3.75 for us.
That's what I like.
Yeah, they start getting pretty small, and if we started putting an extra stress point in it, that would be one thing. Also, in a production wise, frankly, it's another step. And so keep, again, your writer in or caller, your commenter, that's what it is. Yes. Said that how reasonably priced they are. And so we do have to kind of compromise. We're using really high quality, certified sustainably harvested wood. We're doing, the high quality heirloom quality finish on them. So we're, working really hard to keep competitive, and really, so our walnut line now is much more of like a gift line, where that is a more expensive needle. by 3 times almost as much money. And where our birch line is always going to remain kind of our tool line, where we really want everybody, it needs to be available for people to use. We think they're a great tool, not just really beautiful. We like both. And we think that's why knitters and crocheters like doing what they do, is they get to surround themselves with these different beautiful things and that work well, so beautiful fiber and a beautiful tool to work with. And you've set your scene for a really satisfying experience as a maker of something, which is kind of what we do too. We put ourselves in a really nice environment and we were happy making things. So we get it, so yeah, our crochet hooks are all hand cut by me. Get an M you can see. So
that just makes me happy. Even just looking at that just makes me happy. Like, I like the point. Yes. I like the plant. I like everything about those. They're so beautiful.
Yeah, and again, I'm never not improving. And so just recently, like last year, I got together with some crochet bloggers and had them sending them crochet hooks, and got real specific about, how wide this throat is, how deeply cut into the sides it is. Like there a lot of really nuanced little things that went in that recently in this last year that I've developed to try to really fine tune this and improve it and then lock it in. We're really kind of engineering minded, and so we're always speccing these things out. And so like I said, if this is the shaft diameter, that is what it is. We have a chart on the wall that tells us exactly what this is supposed to be every time, and we make it exactly that every time. Same thing with the points on our needles are very specific to how small that radius is on the very tip of the point, how round it is. You won't see any variation. You get a set of double points from us, every single one of those is going to be exactly the same as everyone else. And we think that's important. And I pick up other wood needles out there, and I pick up a set of double points, and I look at them, and if they're all different, I look at them as though those were should be in the firewood bin, because if they were my needles, that's where they would be. I think there are other people making good products out there, but just not as good as ours is what I think.
I can relate with that. One of the things that I want to point out as people are looking at your crochet hooks, I think we even mentioned this in the review, the decorative at the end, it's not too heavy. So I am a pencil hook. Like I hold it like a pencil. But the end is not so heavy that it puts strain on my thumb. Like there are other hooks out there that maybe, like I think I mentioned, I don't know, there's another hook and it's like bulbous and I struggle with that one. And there's another one, like the Addy one, there's one that's an Addy. It's great if you're a knife grip, but if I'm holding it like a pencil, which you can, but it's so heavy at the end and it just strains my hand. Your hooks don't do that at all. And so I get this beautiful hook that doesn't hurt me.
Yeah. And it's so interesting with the crochet hooks, because with needles, there are so many different ways of holding things too, but the hook is where I think the tool makes really a big difference ergonomically.
Yes.
So much more so than the needles, because on the needles, you're kind of up on a shaft of the needle, no matter how, if you're tucking under your armpit or you're whatever, it's all going to be pretty much. You're up on a round or square, I guess, thing, but pretty much those are all the same. Where the hook, it really varies a lot as to where people are on here with their knife hold or pencil, or you got, there's a lot of different things going on. And so I actually, and some news, we haven't completely announced yet, but we are going to have a new crochet hook line coming out pretty soon. And so we're going to be bringing them out. Let's see a shawl pin or a scarfie. So we're going to be bringing them out in like our birch line. And
nice.
So we will have a hook that I'm going to get together with some, maybe you'd like to help decide on this, but get together and figure out how long this should really be. But so what we'll do is we're going to have a simpler one like this that'll be in the birch line, and that'll stay kind of priced alongside our birch line that is our every person's tool kind of thing. And then the crochet, the fancy crochet hook will go into walnut again. And so when we stopped making walnut knitting needles, we still needed to keep our crochet hook alive. So we switched its design into the birch, with the needles we already had the birch design, and so we just kind of dropped the walnut part.
Well, and one thing that's great is now with all of the other, there's other as you saw other crochet hook companies out here with even high priced products, and it's kind of prepped the market, I think, for you to bring back the walnut, where people can be like, you know what, I in a heartbeat, I'm willing to pay that. I don't know why I feel that way. I feel like knitters are much more apt to spend the money on quality needles for themselves, whereas crocheters, it's almost like they've been told they shouldn't. I mean, in all honesty, it's like, no, you don't need that. You should just go ahead, go get yourself some of those cheap aluminum ones, or use the ones that your grandma used to use way long time ago. Like, they don't feel like they should be able to get themselves, higher quality products. Whereas I feel like now the market over the last 5, 6, 7 years has really, it's encouraged them to be like, look, you don't only have to buy acrylic yarn. You can buy wool, you can buy bamboo, you can buy silk, and you can buy really nice needles. You don't just have to use the ones your grandma used before. Does that make any sense?
It totally does. There was an article years back in, I think it was Yarn Market News, which is like an industry magazine, but and they talked, or maybe it could have been one of the others, but anyway, it talked about like the pros and what do they use, and it was on with crocheters, and they had 4 or 5 different people in there, and their answer every time, I mean, as you pointed out with the inline or tapered hook, or I call them inline or offset, but tapered might be the more, but anyway, the type of hook that they would use, whether it was Bates or Boy, was definitely a question they would answer.
Oh, it was.
But their answer after that, well, which brand do you like? They go, meh. I mean, this was before meh was a word.
That's right.
Definitely their answer was meh. It was like, oh, whatever I have, whatever's at hand. It's whatever's in my bag. And that was so, for a long time there, I didn't put a big priority on crochet hooks. As I said, the sales kind of stayed sort of the same. So we they were selling, but it wasn't like, wow. But I do see that recently, I think everyone is becoming more interested in the tools that they use. I'm a woodworker outside of making knitting needles too, and I've definitely seen that in the woodworking tool market, where it was for a long time that everybody just bought whatever Sears brand thing, and that was fine. Where now you see a really wide range of tools out there, where you've got these really expensive German power tools that guys go crazy to mortgage their house to buy a workshop, and you're like, well, are you really going to do that different of work? Well, but it's a joy of using that thing. Right. It's and I think that's important. And also people wanting to pay for experiences now, and buying tools is buying an experience. Buying tools and yarn is buying an experience.
My husband always laughs at me because I'll tell him, like, obviously I have a lot of yarn. Okay, this isn't even like an eighth of it, right? And I know, right? And we'll go out of state, and I'm like, I want to go to the yarn store. He's like, are you serious? I'm like, look, there's some people buy shot glasses. I buy yarn. And so when I travel, I try and buy a skein of locally dyed sock yarn, because I can get a whole project out of one skein of yarn. And he's like, I just don't understand. Like, he'll stand in the store. He's like, I don't understand. There's all of these options. I said, these are all like potential. There's all this potential here. And then you get to go choose what hook you want to use or what needles you want to use. And then you get to choose the product, or you get it, or the design, or you get to design your own. And then it's winding the yarn is the experience. And then swatching and making, I mean, I have goosebumps right now talking about it, because it's all of it together. And he goes, nah, I don't see it. I'm like, I don't see it. And he goes, that's okay. I know. I'm like, how can you not? And like the people around me at the store, they're like, yes. Oh, she knows what she's talking about, right? And it's like, because it's all the experience. And so part of that is choosing the hooks, the needles, and playing, and it's just I love it. I think it's a brilliant thing.
Yeah, and I mean, and also, I think that's a really good point you have too, is that people really should, if your viewers are not local yarn store shoppers, they should be into that. Like, go find the one that's, if there's one near you, you should be going there and becoming pals with people there, because it's a community.
It is.
And then wherever you go, there, traveling, there's one nearby, and if you stop in, you'll be welcomed like you're part of the sisterhood or brotherhood.
Absolutely.
Or, it's a thing, and you go in there, and I know, and they know all the LYS owners kind of know the other ones too. So they, oh, you're from oh, you must go to such and such store. And they kind of, you have this immediate like
Oh,
friendship, and
absolutely.
also they're there to help you get through your project. If you're going to your local yarn store is going to help you continue. And again, that's that kind of get that experience, the fulfillment at the end of actually finishing a project. I think, with me with projects, the finished thing is like satisfying, but then it's sort of just set aside. I mean, you wear your wearables, and I use the things I make, but it's really the experience that sticks with me
All of it.
at the end of any project. So yeah, having the place there where you've got knowledgeable people to help you through stuff. You can get so many different interesting things online, and you can find our needles online from online retailers. But really, I think getting into your LYS, if you're ready for that next step, if you're ready to move up from all the acrylic and the aluminum and plastic, pop into your LYS. Not everything in those stores is too expensive.
Nope.
Our needles are competitively priced with, they're not much more than metal or plastic even. I mean, it's a few bucks here or there. It's really not that big of a deal when you think of, and the fact that they're guaranteed. So don't stress out that they're going to break on you.
Absolutely.
That can be annoying anyway. And we understand that. That's why we work so hard to not have them break.
Right.
But yeah, I really encourage people, if that's anything I could get out there into the world, is go visit your LYS.
Absolutely.
It's awesome. And those places need to be supported.
Absolutely. I worked at a local yarn store for 5 years, and I worked there, and my kids were young. And so I stayed at home. I know I'm totally like hijacking your story, but I stayed at home. My husband worked, but then and I would work at nights. I'd work Monday night and Wednesday night teaching knitting, and then I worked all day Saturday. And so I would get there Saturday morning at 8 a.m. I had a knitting group, and they would take a class, and so it would like be a 4-week class, and then they'd finish. It's like, okay, what's the next class? And somebody would always bring breakfast burritos. We always had coffee, and it was just like, it wasn't like work. Like the whole time I was there the whole day, and it didn't feel like I was at work. I felt like I was Norm on Cheers. Like people would come, hey, Marty, and it was so true though, because it's just the environment, everything about it. I loved it. It's now closed, Knit Knack in Old Town, Arvada, and I loved it so much. But you're right, it's the camaraderie, it's the love and feeling that you get, and the mix of it. Doesn't matter religion or politics. You can come in and just connect, and I think that's just one of the best things ever. We do have a suggestion in the chat room. I'm trying to find. I read it earlier, and I wanted to give props to who it was, but I can't figure out. Somebody mentioned that the longer crochet hook that you said was coming out, that would make, or not a longer, but the more less decorative one.
So the simpler,
Yes. They suggested that would make a really great Tunisian hook, that you should look into making it a Tunisian.
That's I'm glad you said that and reminded me before we leave crochet hooks. Is that yes? Once we bring out a standard length, this is actually a Scarfy, our new single point needle. We'll come back to that, but just as an example, crochet hook about 7.5 inches long, which is kind of what our standard is here on the old ones. But we will bring out Tunisian hooks too. I definitely plan on doing that. They'll come in 10-inch and 14-inch lengths too. So yes, that is definitely going to be a thing.
I found it. It was Das Box Mom. Das Box Mom is the one that suggested that. We also have a question about circular needles. I know you brought that up earlier about a lot of people using circulars. I use circulars primarily.
Totally.
Have you thought about venturing into that, going down that rabbit hole?
Yeah, and it's been a struggle for us. One thing my dad was working on. Do I get to the good news first and then tell the story? The good news is we are committing to bringing out a circular needle by 2020, or let's say in 2020.
Perfect.
A 2020 vision we have for circulars. So this is a goal we've set. And, when you have goals, it's good to tell people. And so we are now designing an interchangeable set. We kind of have had concurrent designs going for interchangeable and a fixed circular, and we kind of feel like our energy is best spent on an interchangeable up front right now. It just seems like that's very popular and kind of a little bit easier for us to work into our small production facility here to start with. So yes, we have what we think will be the best interchangeable design out there. You know, circulars are a tough one, and my dad spent a lot of time when we were doing all the production and he was not doing a lot of marketing. What he was doing was doing a lot of research and development on circulars, and he kind of ran into some walls for him because he's really a perfectionist. And he wanted to see a circular that had no transition, nothing you could feel going down off of that needle or onto the cord or back up. That transition point is so important to have that be snag free and gradual. That and that's something that every knitter complains about their circulars in one way or the other. And it's a compromise because it has to be joined to that cord there. So you have this very difficult to engineer spot. It has to be strong because you're wiggling it with a lot of weight on that cord. Frankly, it can be a significant amount of weight. So, you know, it's a tough problem to overcome. You know, we're a little bit more willing to compromise, I think. And I think through that, we've sort of come up with some solutions where maybe my dad was not able to let it go enough to sort of go, well, we need to get this product out there because more people use circulars than use straight needles, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that points to also our cables, like cable needles selling so well, is because everybody who knits a cable uses a cable. They don't all use a straight or a double point, you know, to do that. So yes, you will see circular needles from us.
That's good.
2020.
I love that.
Which is not far away.
No, it's really not. I know.
For us, it feels like it's right now.
My daughter graduates high school in 2020, and I'm just like,
yikes.
How is that possible? Like, I can't believe it. Anyways, people are loving this. They love the design. They love your story. They ask where you're located. I didn't even ask where you were located.
You tell her.
Oh, we're on the northern coast of California. We're up in Mendocino, a beautiful, tiny, tiny rural little town. The town where my son goes to school is 1,000 people, and it's officially a historical village. So it it has been the movies have been filmed here, and it's super cute, and all the businesses are independently owned, and kind of everybody knows each other. And Chris and I are on 20 acres with just our house and our 3 dogs and our chickens and our ducks and the occasional bear wandering through.
Wow. That's so cool. I'm looking it up on maps right now because I want to see where it is.
To give you an idea of what Mendocino looks like, it's where the Murder, She Wrote house, the Jessica Fletcher house, is in Mendocino. So that actual where she would ride her bicycle up at the beginning of the show.
Yeah, that's
if anybody has ever seen that old show. But yes, so the whole town looks like these old little Victorians from some East Coast town, but it was an old logging town. Back in the day, and fishing too, but mostly logging, especially after the big fire in San Francisco. All the wood that rebuilt San Francisco was harvested up here and taken down to rebuild. So yeah.
How far are you from San Francisco?
3 hours.
North. Yeah. It's a beautiful place to come visit.
And
there's lots of
I'll be there in 2 weeks. So I'm like, maybe I come out early and I just come up and say hello.
Let us know.
I know, right?
We have 2 great local yarn shops, which I recommend both of them. And one of them is in a really beautiful inn with an ocean view. Super nice. And on the way here, there's a lot of fiber stuff happening in the valley that you drive through to get here. And there's sheep, and there's a new actual wool mill. Finally, couples, I think similar to us, worked really hard to open it back up. And so there's a wool mill. There's a lot of fiber stuff happening in the area, which is really cool too.
There used to be classic was that people who had sheep here would just have garages full of fleeces because there was nowhere for them to get them processed. They would have to ship them to China, and nobody who lives in Mendocino wanted to ship their stuff to China to get milled. Nor did they. So you'd find people like giving it away for people to insulate their walls with and things, which it makes a really wonderful insulation, but it would be much better on some needles or some hooks.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it's really exciting that the wool mill is open here. So we got a California-based wool mill locally. So we're in a really good place for fiber arts and being so rural. Although a lot of rural communities seem to be that way. You know, there's a big giant wool fair in California wool fair that happens in the valley there too. Just because there's so many sheep.
Oh my God! Now I'm seriously thinking about it because I was coming out early anyways. I'm doing side note, I'm doing classes at Creative Bug on the 18th and 19th. So I was going to fly out the 17th, which is a Sunday, but maybe I fly out the 16th and drive up to Mendocino and just kind of hang out a little bit and then come back on Sunday to do my classes Monday and Tuesday. I'm going to see if I could change that up because that would be really fun.
You mean like the 16th, like in a week or so?
Like, yes, like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We won't be here.
We're going to be at TNN. No, we're going to be in Cleveland.
Oh,
all
yes.
that, and we'll be in Cleveland. Yeah, so there's the big trade show, National Needle Arts Association commercial trade show is in Cleveland that same weekend, and we will be there telling our story over and over again.
Yeah, that's why I couldn't go to TNA this year, is because I have this thing at Creative Bug. I was like, I can't go, but you know what? I'm there every month. Maybe I'll just make it happen.
Yes,
and the local yarn shops are still here.
That's cool. I know. That's so fun, though. This has been such a fun podcast. And I want to let the listeners know, I'm going to let you guys take a drink because you've been talking and take a breath. I want to let the listeners know that every podcast we're blessed enough to have guests that come on that give away prizes. And this is just that way. So Chris and Mickery, like Hickory, are giving away either a set of knitting needles or a crochet hook to a live listener right now. And then we will also give one away to somebody who leaves a comment on the show notes. So for right now, if you will take a moment, if you are listening live to the podcast, if you are listening right now, literally like it's 11:39. Wow, we've been talking an hour. I can't believe it.
Already?
I know, it's fun, right? Time flies when you're having fun. If you're listening right now, please post in the chat room, I want to win, and then make sure you have given this video a thumbs up. So I want to win and thumbs up, and I will randomly select a winner here in just a little bit. If you're not listening live, or if you're catching this on a later date, don't worry. There's always a chance for you to win as well. Here on the Yarn Thing podcast, the guests usually come on and they give prizes away to a call-in listener and to somebody who leaves a comment on the show notes. The show notes can be found over at marleybird.com. They've also been, the link has been placed in the video description of this video. So if you're watching on your mobile, you'll see that there's like an upside down, like it's called a caret. It's an upside down, or it's a V. If you click on that, you'll see the video description and you'll see the link right there. If you're watching on your computer, you'll see, just look underneath the video and you'll see video description. And you'll see the link for the show notes. In the show notes, there is a brief description of everything we might have talked about today, including links and images. And at the very bottom, you will post a comment. And it just says, leave a reply or leave a comment. Click on that. You will leave a reply or a comment, including a keyword that Chris or Mickery will give us here in just a second. By entering that keyword in your comment, that is kind of your golden ticket for like proof that you actually watched the show. You have like 2, 3, 4 weeks to leave your comment on that show. So if you're watching this particular podcast weeks after the air date of it, don't worry, there's probably still a chance for you to win. In about 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks sometimes after the show airs, we will go back then, randomly select a winner and announce that winner. So for example, ironically enough, another woodworker who was on the podcast, Sean O'Brien of Shenanigans, was on the show back in March. He and his wife, lovely couple. They make wonderful tools for crocheters, for blocking boards, and I mean, just a plethora of stuff. If you didn't get a chance to watch that show, you really should. It was great. And again, another husband and wife team, another partner team. And so their keyword was crochet workstation. And so the comment winner is getting an 8-inch Premier Blocks All. It's a $99 value. And the comment winner is Joyce Hancock. Your comment was wonderful show, Marley. I love seeing all of the items, the crochet. Okay, hold on. I have to scroll over. Wonderful show, Marley. I love seeing all the items they have designed. Their crochet workstation is such a unique design. I would love to own some of their products. Well, congratulations, Joyce. You are getting one. All I need you to do is email me, winner@yarnthingpodcast.com. Don't worry about that. If you're not listening to the show, we will email you to make sure you know that you were the lucky winner. So it's as easy as that, you guys. All you are going to do is make sure you go to the show notes for today's show for Brittany Needles and Hooks. Click on the leave a reply or leave a comment section and make sure you leave a reply or a comment that includes a keyword. So, Chris and Mickery, what should their keyword be?
Scarfies.
Scarfies. Scarfies is
I'll
your
explain
keyword.
what that is.
That's what I was
Yes.
going to ask you to. So Scarfies is your keyword, everybody. Make sure you include that in the show notes. Just a quick reminder, we love your comments here on YouTube. We love them on Facebook. We love them on Ravelry. We love them on Instagram. But to be chosen, randomly selected, or have a chance to be randomly selected, you need to make sure you leave your keyword in the show notes over on marleybird.com. All right. So while they are going to go and do that after the show, why don't you tell us what Scarfie is?
Okay, so we have gotten some, and I had this idea a while ago, and then we got some requests that some knitters really wanted a shorter straight needle, and so especially people who use circulars, but on a smaller project, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to, or if you're just swatching something up or just want to try out a yarn, and so we've come out with our Scarfies, which are little scarf needles. And it's a 7.5-inch single point needle. And what a couple different things that people really like, who were talking me into or pressuring me into making them, is that they're so much shorter that really, unlike a regular single point where you have so much hanging out back behind you here, and all of your weight of your knitting is all hanging off the side of your needle, where it's kind of giving you this twisting of your wrist. And a lot of knitters don't really like that. And even if you have a smaller project, it's still kind of moving off to the side. And so what this does is it keeps all your knitting right underneath where you're working. So it feels a lot more like using a circular in that way, where your knitting is all kind of underneath you instead of hanging off to the side. The other thing is that a lot of yarn companies really love these to be able to go in the ever popular now kits, where they've got a couple of skeins of yarn and a pattern and a nice pair of needles in there for you to use. And so they fit really well in the kits. And for those things that are just small little projects, they really work well. And so this is our new line, and we called them Scarfies because they're good for scarves. But also I like the tagline, Scarfies, say hello to my little friend.
I love it.
Anyway, say hello to our little friend, the Scarfies, and these will be out in the fall, right, Mickery?
Very cool.
Yeah, cracking the whip on that, but
committed to do it. Making them now.
So yeah, we're gonna have some of these to pass around at TNNA, and then they've been available actually in kits as kind of pre-promotion for LYS Day that happened recently, which is kind of a national thing that TNNA is trying to get started, where we're trying to support local yarn stores. It's kind of like inspired by Record Store Day, which really helped to get kind of that industry, keep it kind of going, of vinyl records. But yarn stores need our support. And so it's a way for the suppliers of yarn and needles and things to help out the yarn stores and give them a day to kind of promote things. So we had these in a few different kits from some great yarn companies like Stitch Sprouts and Zula Luxury Fibers, Cashmere Treats, and
Rainbow,
Dream and Color Yarns.
All great companies.
All great companies had beautiful kits that included our Scarfies in there. And so they fit nicely. I think those kits are such a cool thing for beginners or experienced knitters. You can just, especially that traveling and going into an LYS, if they've got a cool kit in there that has a good color and the pattern, man, you can just grab that and you're like, got a goodie, got something for the car.
That's right.
Such a such a cool, easy thing to be able to, it can be overwhelming. And if you're like, well, I'm not sure I'm really ready to dive into a big thing, well, a nice kit is really a great way to go. So that was pressure from the yarn companies were really what was driving this to really happen. Although I always thought that there was a market for a shorter single point.
I think that's perfect. Yeah, the kits to me, they're that candy bar purchase at the local yarn store. When you're at the grocery store, it's like, oh, I could get that little candy bar. But if you have a kit at the cash wrap at a local yarn store, that's the candy bar for knitters and crocheters. I think that's brilliant.
And I think if you spent time there and you've been like handling all this yarn and stuff, and maybe you haven't found that thing, you're still just like, you feel this need to like have something that
your money is dripping out of your pocket. You're just like, what can I
buy? Right. Yeah. And I think in those little projects, it's very cool. And so nice also, for on a plane or something, and wood needles you can take them on airplanes.
Yep.
TSA won't try to take them away from you. So, that's a really good thing too. And again, you're not going to run into the person next to you when you're knitting with a nice short pair of scarfies. So if you can fit your project on them, they're great. And again, once we do have a circular, you can just use these for swatching up because the gauge will be exactly the same as what the needles our circulars have too. So yeah.
I love it. Those are so brilliant. I love that. Super cool. Awesome. Did we talk about everything we wanted to? I was looking over my list.
Oh, you guys had talked about wax as far as crochet hooks and wood hooks. So we wanted to touch on that.
Perfect. There you go. Yes. Needle wax. Perfect.
So Micry is the one that actually developed this. And we had requests from distributors who were asking us, our customers want to know what they should do to maintain.
Smells so good.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chris. She's like,
no, it's okay.
You have to have a jar.
It's really not an inhalant. It's we swear it does now.
If you had some there, you would do the same thing. I said, and everybody has the exact same thing. If we have it like at a show or somebody's doing it, you open it up and everybody smells it. It's the first thing you do. And that was my initial reaction with it too. And so when I was developing it, I made sure it did not have cheap perfume oil in it. I wanted it to have a little bit of a smell. It has one of the natural waxes is beeswax. So it already has like a nice, a warm, natural, yummy smell. And so I got the best all natural organic vanilla oil. Ooh. And there's just a minute amount. So you can't quite tell, but it's super pleasant. And you don't want to eat it, but it smells like you could. I mean, it wouldn't hurt you if you did. It's not going to be delicious, but it's really nice. And so we get a little bit conflicted because on the one hand, the finish on our needles is actually really good. Like this is a product you don't necessarily need.
I was actually surprised you even had one because I thought your finish was so wonderful. I was like, oh, I didn't realize that they needed one. But you don't.
Yeah, no. And a lot of people had asked for it for a while. And, if your needles are 15 years old and you want to maintain it, it's nice. If you get something on there, if you had oily fingers or something something got on your needles, it can actually be good to help clean that off and restore the finish. It can be good on other wood products that maybe didn't have such a good finish to start with.
We think we actually sell probably more of our needle wax to people who are trying to improve the finish of other wood needles because I think that's what's happening there, and that's fine with us. You can do that. You can try to improve that finish, and then when you're ready, you can just come on over and buy some of our needles. And it won't frankly need that probably for at least 5 years. You guys talked about lanolin from the wool getting on your needles or hooks, and lanolin is a fairly slippery, waxy oil, but it is rather sticky. So what I say is actually, if you're finding that your Brittany needles are feeling a little stickier than you thought they might, try just wiping them off with a clean cloth, even a paper towel, or better yet, a reusable cotton towel is what I prefer. A piece of my old t-shirt cut up usually. Wipe them off really well. just dry even, and you will probably find that slipperiness comes right back to them. Our needles are finished. It's not just a porous wood. There's actually a seal. There's no coating, so you'll never find any flaking. There's some things out there that would have an actual like varnish finish, which is on top of the wood. Our finish is definitely in the wood, though it's not a resin impregnated wood. So what we're talking about here is a really natural wood that has a very old school kind of heirloom quality finish on it, that has been specially formulated by us to be as slippery as we can get it. So normal wood finishes you get, shininess is something they look for, but slipperiness is not necessarily something that most wood finishes look for. If you have a kitchen table, you don't actually want the surface of it to be really slippery, because you set your glass down on it and it slides across the table. You don't actually want that. But knitting needles are someplace that you really, really do. You want them to be gliding smoothly. So suffice it to say, we did a lot of experimenting with different waxes, and that's kind of the finish that goes on top. But then there's a sealer that goes down in there. And so playing around with different formulations of that, and then coming up with our very own formula that we're still constantly tweaking and getting a little bit closer to that, what we think is the gold standard of a mirror polished metal needle, which is going to be the smoothest thing that you can find. Also, because they're wood, even if I think we got to that mirror polish, I think you may find that they still didn't feel like they were as slippery. I think that's because of the weight difference. They don't fall out of your knitting. You know, you knit with our double points, and they kind of tend to stay where they are. I think a lot of that is just there's almost no weight to them, you know, so there's no energy, no inertia that wants to have them fall out. So yeah, they stay where they go. Also, there is a very ever so slight like 1/1000th of an inch belling out toward the end. So once you get your needles up on where your stitches up on our needles, they tend to kind of stay up there, even though it's 1/1000th of an inch or something. It's really microscopic. You can't feel it or see the difference, but there is a very slight dropping down once you get up onto the shaft of most of the double points, especially because of that falling out one end or the other thing. So there is a tiny bit of engineering in there of that. But then other than that, we're just trying to get the things as slippery as possible. And then there's the wonderfulness of wood, which again, I say I work with in my hobby world too. I'm rebuilding a wooden boat.
Wow.
And so that's like my off. Yeah. So I make thousands of these little tiny things. And then I've got this one humongous wood thing that I got to work on that's not at home. So since we work at home, it's hard sometimes to separate, you know, you may know, like separating work from home life. If it's right here, you tend to be working all the time. And so, yeah, I keep the fun parked at a marina somewhere else. Luckily, a very cheap marina because we live in a rural area. There's not, you know, so, but it's, you know, cheaper than me having an office somewhere else. So then we just have a place to go and play. We, cool. We keep our kayaks there, and Mikria and our son will go out kayaking while I sand something and refinish it. And, you know, and that's my meditation and my, you know, getting back to it. So I can stare at wood all the time. It really is like the most wonderful thing for me to make stuff with. I mean, we haven't even gotten into so many things we could talk about, Marley, because we haven't gotten into sustainability and carbon footprint. But all these things, I'll just say, are really supported by buying wood products, buying natural fiber products. All these things are sustainable. We don't have to dig up more oil to make more plastic needles and more acrylic yarn. We have animals and trees and plants that are going to supply these things to us. We can keep using those, and they really are a joy to work with. And we hope that everybody will just, like, you know, at least just try to be more natural and be more supportive of your local community. That's kind of what we're all about.
That's
so
awesome.
Coming down from my dad with his anti-corporate, kind of had to get out of that R&D basement that they had him working in, and, you know, on down to us. We're not sold in big box stores. You will only find us in LYSs or independent online retailers.
That's a choice we made on purpose.
Yeah, I mean, we've been asked to be in big box stores and to do that thing, and we considered it. One of the things right away they said to us is, they go, great, we'll, you know, I think it was one of the big chain hobby lobby-ish things. But anyway, they said, okay, well, great, we'll take on your needle line. Just we're going to ask you to put all of your needles in plastic bags for us. And do you have one of our packages, Mickery?
I love your packaging because it's so natural.
Yeah, so
it totally works with your needles.
Yeah, it's super simple. It's reusable, so you can get your needles back in there, especially to just protect the points. That doesn't fit that package, but you get the idea. And then it's completely recyclable. If you tore the label off, you could put it in your garden and compost it. I mean, so, zero plastic anywhere. That's one of the hurdles that we had in getting to circular needles is we're going to have to actually have some plastic in our shop that we're working with, because that's what the 2 needles are attached with. But, I've come to terms with that. We can still make a carbon negative product. Every time you buy wood, anything, you're buying carbon credits of your very own, because wood is made of carbon. And if you own it and you take care of it and you don't burn it, or if you don't burn it, it doesn't release its carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and keeps our planet a happier place. Right. So if you're interested in being an environmentalist, wood is a great thing, especially something that's going to last for a long time. And it's a small piece of wood, but every little piece counts. Absolutely. Especially if you're not going to buy something made out of plastic at the same time. Right. So.
Right. I love it. It's so great. This has been such a fun podcast, and let's go ahead and give away a prize to the live listener. And so I am just going to scroll up here to where it started, where people started writing, I want to win. All right, there it is. So I'm going to scroll down and up. You tell me when to stop. That's going to be the winner.
Okay. Ready, stop.
All right. Irma Hendricks. Congratulations, Irma Hendricks.
Yeah,
Irma, congratulations. All I need you to do is email me winner@yarnthingpodcast.com. Include your mailing address, your phone number. Should they include whether she wants knitting needles or crochet hook?
Yeah, and go ahead, and if she wanted to go look at our website, we're going to do one of the birch needles, birch line for this. The walnut is much more expensive, and so we'll keep that as an enticement. Maybe we could do that for another special giveaway for you or something.
Perfect.
But if she wants to look at the website and pick out any size of birch needle she wants, maybe she'd like the cables, maybe she'd like single points, new scarfies. They're not out yet, but we could get you a size of that, Irma, if you want. Okay. So definitely just pick out whatever size of our products or styles you want. Double point, single point, crochet hook.
Perfect. So Irma, congratulations. Oh, she's posting. She says, "Oh my gosh, I'm so surprised," is what she wrote. So Irma, email me winner@yarnthingpodcast.com with your mailing address, your phone number, and take a look at the Brittany Needles website and pick out either your knitting needles or a crochet hook, the birch line. And they also mentioned that you could try out the cable needles if you want those. I love those. They're great. I will tell you. So congratulations. Everybody else who was not a winner on the live show, don't worry. There's still a chance for you to win. Make sure you go to the show notes over on marleybird.com and leave your comment or reply on those show notes and include the keyword scarfie. Mickery and Chris, I had such a great time listening to your story. Like, seriously, it's super fascinating. I wish I was going to TNA to see you guys, because it would be great just to go say hello and hang out a little bit, but maybe sometime soon, maybe my next trip to San Francisco.
Yes.
All right.
Do let us know.
I would love to. Like, seriously, I think that would be just a great time. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Marley.
Thank you so much for having us. This is super fun.
Awesome. I had such a great time. And hopefully all of you listeners out there had fun as well. Make sure you join me back here on Tuesdays at 10 o'clock Mountain Time. And we have wonderful guests always on the show. And this is sponsored by the wonderful people over at Creative Bug, craftsy.com, Buffalo Wool Company, Erin Lane Bags, Stitches.events, and Red Heart Yarns, where I'm the proud national spokesperson. Thanks, everybody. Bye.